So, since we're starting to talk about your family ancestral history, I was wondering if you could tell me where your family is originally from.
My dad's side is from Bitlis, Armenia, and as far as I know, my mom's side is part Gallipoli and part Bitlis as well.
Mm. And who of your relatives lived in Armenia?
Um, all of them?
Can you name some of the names you
Oh, I'm
remember?
sorry.
No, no worries.
Well, okay. It's hard for me to name them all, in part because I've forgotten some of them.
Hmm.
Uh, but then, uh, well, my grandfather and grandmother, Antoyan, um, they were in Belize,
Hmm.
and then the Karafeshian family. That's my mom's side. Um, they and then my grandmother's last name on my mom's side was Hanamirian.
Hmm.
Um, and her family was there until the massacre as well. Um, Other relatives that ended up coming to the United States, um, there's a number, excuse me, a number of them, but it's been a while since I've used their names or seen them. I've forgotten.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, I'll have to look them up.
And when did your grandfather and grandmother on your dad's side come to America?
1921. They, my grandfather had a business in Aleppo, Syria,
Mm.
that he was with, or he was at, for probably half the year, apparently. Um, and he would then go back home to be at least to be home. Um, when the massacre started, apparently in 1918, he then went back to Beatles to try to help take care of his family. He was um, he was married at the time and with two children. Um, my aunt, who was I think born 1909, 1907, somewhere around there.
Mm-hmm.
And then my dad was born, we figure, somewhere in 1912, November 11th, 1912, is what everybody assumed. Kind of worked as best they could. Um, they were not able to escape right away. And what happened was they apparently lived in a friend of my grandfather's home for until they were able to come to the United States. He was Turkish,
Mm.
and they were up in the attic.
Wow. Do you know
Um,
where that was?
it was in Beatles,
Mm.
as far as I know. When the time came that they got um, all the paperwork done to emigrate to the United States, um, they were ready to leave. Actually, during that time, Turks would come in, soldiers, to the house and search the house, even though the owner was Turkish. And they were up in the attic, and they never went up to the attic. I don't know why, but that's what I was told. Um, and then when the time came to go, uh, the older brother, sorry, the older son, eldest son of that person that was keeping them,
Mm-hmm.
helping them stay, um, gave a demand that they leave the daughter so he can marry her, or he'll have the entire family killed.
Wow.
So after some thoughts about it, they decided that they'll leave the daughter. She was about 11. This was 1920 now. So she was about 11 years old, I think, 12 years old, something like that. And my dad was about 7.
And that was your aunt.
That was my aunt, correct?
Wow.
Yeah. And as they decided to do that, um, the photograph um, for the documentation to come to the United States had 4 people, um, a man and a woman, and then the 2 kids. Well, now they're missing a daughter, right? So they either have to retake and reapply, or they try to find another girl to emigrate with them as the daughter. So I think my grandfather reached out to one of his siblings and asked if one of them would be willing to come to the United States with them. And they selected one, as far as I could tell. And that was Imast. I believe her last name, maiden name, was Hach Manugian. It's like the cross, Hach, and then Manugian. So she ended up assuming the Antoyan name because of the, forget what you call the photograph for the paperwork to come over. I forgot what you call that.
I'm not sure.
The what's your papers? It's kind of like your passport.
Immigration papers.
There you go. Thank you.
Profile they had.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's a bit odd was that the photograph that I have of them was of yet another woman.
Oh.
And apparently, and it wasn't my aunt. Apparently, they did get another photograph somehow, and it was of a woman that became sick. So she couldn't go. It was very confusing. So my aunt Imast came with them, immigrated to the United States with them, and lived with them. And it turned out that her family, pretty much, as well as most of the other families, were killed. I think she had a brother that escaped to France, but I never met him. Well, for me, I grew up in a house that my grandparents built 1940. And Auntie Imast was married and ended up, her and her husband and 3 daughters, building a house adjacent to us.
Wow.
So we were always together. Hasmig Aronian is the eldest daughter of Auntie Imast.
Oh, wow.
That's why Haas is my first cousin. Sorry, second cousin officially, but she's 30 years older than I am, which kind of works out kind of weird. So we always called her and her 2 sisters Auntie, because those of us that my age, my sister's age, is a little bit older than me, and their kids were all about the same age. Mm-hmm. So we were kind of like a generation off.
That's all good, yeah.
But it didn't matter, you know. So I know that there were several things that occurred. My mom's side, my grandmother had an uncle that was living here in the United States at the time, around the 1900s, and wanted to try to have his families come over, not because of the massacre, because it hadn't happened yet, but just because it was better for them. He went back to Armenia to see who he could get to come with him. No one went, pretty much, because why? But then my grandmother, for some reason, decided that she wanted to come. So she came by herself, and he was here, and he was to meet her at Ellis Island.
Mm.
Um, the notification that she sent him never really reached him.
Mm.
So when she came and ended up at Ellis Island, he was not there to greet her. So she got off Ellis Island and somehow bought a ticket, a train ticket to Fresno because she knew where she did know English, and apparently she had a piece of paper that had the address
Wow.
of of where her uncle was at in Fresno. So she would just show somebody, here, and so like where, and they would kind of show her the directions to where to go. So
Fascinating.
she ended up here when he had gotten word that she was over there at Ellis Island. So they somehow crisscrossed each other.
Completely.
So she was here when he got there. So he finally got here and she lived with him. And I'm not sure how she met my grandfather. Again, being part of the Armenian town here, it was probably pretty hard not to know everyone, just because you're in a small community and of people. Uh, at that time, uh, before the 1933, it was a single, well, it wasn't a single church, I take that back. Um, I think there was the Presbyterian church also that was downtown, but mainly Holy Trinity was the main church, if you will, for most of the Armenians.
Mm.
And that was built in 1913 to 1914.
That's great.
The original one, I think, burned. That was in Chinatown, some blocks away. And then they bought this piece of property that it's on currently.
The current one was built in 1913, 1914?
The current one, yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah. And we were able to put it on the National Register of Historic Places. I think we did it in 1985. Started 84, but it officially finished in 85. So I'm not sure how, like I say, my grandparents on my mom's side met. It must have been through some function or friends or something. They eventually then, I guess they dated and then got married. Um, and then they started living on Van Ness Boulevard in Fresno, 236 Van Ness.
Mm.
Um, and amongst all the other Armenians that were there at the time. My mom was first out. So my grandmother had two sons before my mom, but they died as infants.
Oh.
And then my mom was born in 1915. And, and, and then her sister, my Aunt V, was born 1923, same day, July 25th.
Wow.
And then they had another daughter. She had another daughter, the mom, my grandmother. But then she ended up having some issues as a result of birth from the doctor that was delivering, where then she died as well. So it was really just the two of them. And NTV, Virginia Carfishin, never did get married, but she took care of the mom, as we did too. But they lived together. And my grandfather on my mom's side was a tailor. My mom then became a tailor. Mm. And during high school, beginning college, she wasn't, I don't think, allowed to go to college. The teachers here said that college isn't for women. So she got rather upset. Mm. She ended up moving to San Francisco for about a year and a half. And World War II started, and then she came back home. Mm. Um, so she was able to live there for a while. We've got other relatives there in San Francisco, the Soroyan family we're related to.
Oh, that's great.
Um, yeah, Uncle Miran, Auntie Alice. Um, they had a shoe store on the Visadero, I think,
Oh,
with their home up above it and the store down below. So Jack Soroyan is the only one left, if you will, of that family that's still alive.
wow.
You might want to look him up. I
Yeah.
can give you the address and phone number.
He the son of Louis Soroyan?
He was the
grandson?
son.
Son. Wow.
He's in his 90s.
Thank you.
Yeah, he was a dentist.
Wanted to step back a little bit. You have such great stories about your grandparents on both sides. I was wondering if you ever knew what your grandparents on your dad's side did for a living in Armenia.
They opened up a store that was kind of like a combination grocery store, hardware store. And apparently that's kind of what he had in Aleppo, I believe. And so he kind of did that here for a while. My dad was helping, but then my dad took an interest to music and the violin specifically. So he became pretty much a violinist.
Wow.
And was able to do other instruments as well. Would perform at various places. He wasn't professionally educated, if you will, but he did it on his own. And
was this in his younger years?
Yes.
Or throughout his whole life?
He was playing up until he fell off a roof in 1954, and then he wrecked his elbow. That was the fret elbow, and I was born in '54, so I didn't hear him play that often. My sister did, though. She's 7 years older.
Wow.
So what I remember is he used to try to play the cello at times, but not the violin. He couldn't bend his elbow, his arm, because it had been fractured when he fell. So, but playing the cello, I guess you didn't have to bend the arm as much like you do the violin. My mom asked me once, because she played the piano, my sister played the piano, what instrument I was going to play. And my sister had just bought a transistor radio. So I obnoxiously said transistor radio. So then my mom said, screw you, we're not teaching you anything.
Wow.
But they had that store until, gosh, it was after the war, World War II, sometime. And they sold it to another Antoyan relative that was here. And they took over. It was, gosh, and I just forgot the name of it. There was OK Market, which that wasn't it. That was another relative, Zerganian family. Actually, Vadajan here has it as part of the history of Fresno. He's got the name of the market. I'll have to look at the brochure.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No,
or the website.
How interesting.
So they had that, but they could never apparently get over the fact that they left their daughter behind. That really obsessed them quite a bit, apparently. And my grandmother apparently had headaches all the time that could never go away because she felt guilty having left. Not that she felt bad that they brought Auntie Emost over. However, their own daughter, and they would communicate with her writing. I even did too in writing, where we would send letters to her. And she ended up, for herself, marrying that first, the eldest son. He died soon thereafter. So the next son up married her. And they then established a family of, I don't remember, three children. They were told they were half Armenian. The younger generation was never told that they were quarter Armenian, just because of the animosity that the Turks had against the Armenians. And when she received a letter from us, that was written in Armenian, she would go into her room, because she was living with one of the kids, because her husband, I guess, had died earlier on too. And when their kids got married, she then lived with them. She would, I guess, sequence it. And she would go into her bedroom and read the letter and then burn it, because it was written in Armenian. And no one was to know. So some years later, a woman found Zach's Facebook page, and communicated with him, or then found, and I think he gave her my phone number at the office, or she found my phone number through that. And I got a call from her one day, and it turns out that it was the granddaughter of my aunt. And when my aunt was dying, around the 80s sometime, she told her, because she was taking care of my aunt, her grandmother, that she was Armenian. And that shocked the heck out of her. So she was trying to get in touch with me to then apologize. I said, it's a bit late. And you didn't do it.
Yeah.
You know, your older guys did it, not you. But she couldn't get over that. And she was very, very frustrated about it. My aunt did come over to visit us in 1975. No, 73 or 75, summer, for about 6 weeks. Enjoyed it very much.
So the mom of the person who reached out to you?
The grandmother. It was my dad's sister.
Okay. Yes.
My dad's sister, the one that they...
Oh, yes. Okay.
She was able to come to the United States for about 6 weeks during the summer. And we took her just about everywhere in California. And told her that she could stay. She didn't have to go back. But she had family, she said, which she did. So she went back instead. And then she eventually died there.
So your family on your dad's side, they decided to immigrate. They came straight to Fresno, California? Or are you aware of them living somewhere else?
They weren't living anywhere else.
Okay.
No, they came straight to Fresno. I guess because they knew people here. By the time they came in the early 20s, Fresno had established itself as a destination, kind of like Watertown was, you know, back east for those people going back east. I've got relatives over there as well. You know, we've got relatives everywhere. One of my grandmother's siblings on my mom's side ended up in Buenos Aires. That we used to get mail from that person.
Wow.
So we got relatives there. I have no clue who they are, you know, not yet anyway. But Fresno was their destination. And it might have been because of other Antoyan relatives here, but I don't know that for sure. My mom wrote a variety of things before she died. I haven't gone through it yet. I was hoping to do that by now, but haven't had the chance to. So maybe in that history, it's got some of that explanation about both families.
And your grandma on your mom's side, she was the only member of her family who had interest in taking her uncle up on coming to Ellis Island, coming to the United States.
Yeah.
Do you know what her life was like in Armenia, or why she made that decision to come here?
You know, I'm not exactly sure what her life was like there. I don't think it was. I don't think it was a mean or difficult in any way per se um, to make her want to decide to come. I think maybe she might have been told that the rest of the family would be following, and that never happened for whatever reasons.
Yeah. I was wondering if you knew or have any stories about what the initial years and any concerns about assimilation there were for your grandparents and parents in Fresno. There were language barriers. I know you mentioned that and other difficulties.
Yeah, assimilation actually wasn't going to be necessarily allowed as far as I'm concerned. And I say that because of all the different, there was Armenian town, there's Italian town, there's German town here in Fresno. There are all these little communities of immigrants, none of which really went to the other side. However, I do have a relative, Antoyan relative, that lived here that married an Italian, which at the time that they did get married, that was still kind of offbeat. I don't know how the family allowed them to get married. I'm glad they did, to be honest, but certainly, but you don't hear about that happening very often. There is an occasion, my mom was about the only one that knew how to drive out of the family later than my aunt,
wow.
right? Because the older people, they just didn't want to learn how to drive. Or if they did learn how to drive, it was without a license or anything. So my mom was about the only one. And so she would drive everybody around. There was one woman whose family owned property on Kings Canyon Boulevard. And that at that time, it was orchards and groves and stuff, farmland. And it was about Peach or Minnewawa and Kings Canyon. And at Clovis and Kings Canyon, which is further east, Clovis is a pretty major street, maybe even then. Not like it is now, though. Sunnyside, that's the Sunnyside area, but this is prior to Sunnyside. On the northwest corner, there was a sign that went up, large sign, that said that a new housing tract was coming in, and that lots are available and homes are available to be built. Except these are the nationalities of people that were not allowed. It was on the sign.
Okay.
And there was a list in alphabetical order of darn near everybody. And like who else is left to then buy the properties? Predominantly just white guys. All the nationalities were listed. And so this woman saw it, and then called my mom and asked her if she would be willing to pick her up and take her to a board meeting of these people that own the land. So my mom said, sure. And took her. She was in the meeting. And this woman apparently wanted to make sure that they knew that she was pretty wealthy, even then, because she wore a mink stole or, all this kind of stuff, and they all recognized who she was. So they all said, what brings you here to the meeting? And she quite frankly said, apparently, that either you take the sign down, in 48 hours, 2 days, or I will make sure that our family will tear up all the land that is northwest of you, tear all that out and install a pigsty, a pig farm. Oh. And the reason for it being northwest is that's where the breeze comes in, so that all the smell would then kind of venture over to where these new houses are. Oh, Mrs. Musician, you wouldn't do that. Apparently, that's what they said. And she said, "Try me. Just take the sign down. You won't get it." So they did actually take the sign down. However, no one bought land there. I think my mom said they sold about maybe 3 or 4 lots, less than 10 lots, and they went bankrupt.
My goodness. Wow.
So to at that time to marry into another, to assimilate would have been hard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So when I was getting of age to marry, I was dating people that were not Armenian. Oh, in fact, I was going to try to go out with a girl in high school, and she said that her dad wouldn't let her go out with Armenians.
Wow. That's crazy.
I got bused to junior high because mine got condemned. And so I got bused to a predominantly white place, white school in Fresno. And I was in amongst Latin Americans or Latinos, some African Americans, and very few whites. And I was in a math class, an advanced math class, and I was asked later, I saw you get off the bus. Yeah. Well, why are you in this math class? How is it you qualify to get in this math class? I said, I don't understand what you're asking. What's the, well, most of the people that come off the bus are not that smart. I said, I'm sorry, but I think that's reversed. I don't think many of you guys are that smart for thinking that. It's just kind of crazy. But those are the kinds of things, even in my generation, were still around. So when I was thinking of getting closer to a particular person for possibly marriage, I started feeling guilty that she was not Armenian. Never thought about that before, and that I was going to be the last Antoyan to be full-blooded Armenian. So I stopped the relationship and just kind of hung out for a while until then I met Blanche, my wife, and then we dated, and then we got married. She's full-blooded. So now it's on my kids.
Wow.
But I've never pressured them into that. That's not cool. And my parents never really ever did that to me. They never pushed that. But yeah, it's kind of different. Those kinds of thoughts.
I was wondering if you had any more you could tell me about what old Armenian town was like in the 1920s or 30s.
To be honest, I could only tell you as I grew up in the 50s what it was like in the 60s. It was where when I'd go to church and I'd go to Armenian school on Saturdays, I'd walk from the church to my grandmother's house on Van Ness. And people would come out and out of their homes and greet me, some of which I didn't know, some of which I did know. And they wanted me to say something to my grandmother. My grandmother on my mom's side was the only grandparent that I ever saw and knew.
Oh.
The others died before I was born. So she was the only one. And she was pretty well known and seemed pretty well liked and respected. So it was a very tight-knit community. Even where I grew up, a little bit further to the east, the next location for where Armenians went after that were allowed to go. When I was walking home from elementary school, my mom would get calls from residents on the way that would see me, know who I was, and report to my mom what I was doing, whatever it was, which usually wasn't very good. So my mom would, tell me what's going on, thumped me a bit, maybe here and there, depending on what it was or whatever. But that's the way that Armenian community was like too, the old Armenian community. Walked everywhere, said hi to everybody that was outside. A lot of them were outside because no AC during the summertime. Families would get together a lot. And it was usually, it seemed to be a very friendly place to me. As far as, and there were businesses there, and they were all working hard, downtown as well. So that's as far as I can remember what was going on.
And I was curious if you had any favorite memories of your grandma or spending time with her in your early years.
When I was a kid, I, for whatever reasons, remember there was, I would sleep in the same bed as she was. Okay, as a little guy, that's what you do. I would, because of the mattress type, I would always remember ending up rolling involuntarily to her. So I would wake up and she's right there.
Very
back
close.
Usually. It's kind of awkward. And just, she would always be watching the soap operas. She didn't know English very well at all. You'd have to speak to her in Armenian or broken English. But yet she knew what was going on with all the soap operas. And so she would explain them to me, and she was always a fun person. She was fun to be with.
Wow. And did you speak Armenian to her growing up?
I did to some extent, not real fluent, but to some extent. I don't do so much anymore, just because I haven't used it for so long.
Yeah.
My fault.
And you mentioned that when you were younger, you would walk either from your church or from Armenian school on the weekends. Can you talk a little about your experience in both of those institutions?
So Armenian school was on Saturdays, and it was in the basement of the church. And it was fun. It was good. Got to see a bunch of other people. And it taught me how to speak Armenian to some extent. Taught me the history of Armenia as well, because it wasn't just learning how to speak. And knew the teachers until they died, actually, because they were still part of the church. Being part of church, my cousin Randy Aronian, Haas's son, youngest child, and I got tossed out of third grade Sunday school because we were not very respectful. And my mom being organist of the church, and his mom being choir member of the church. Wow. They thought, well, we'll make them, they're tall enough, they could be candle boys. And being on the altar, that's where our moms could watch us. And we couldn't do anything really that bad. Well, we found ways. We were candle boys for about 7 years.
Oh my goodness.
Yep. And yeah, my mom had to stop playing the organ once in a while. We were in the vestry and come in, thump us, and go back out. Choir all knew it, and they just continued singing, and then when she'd come out, she'd just pick up where they left off, kind of thing, or continue with them. And everyone knew it. Even the people in the church knew it, so they just kind of accepted it. My grandfather on my mom's side was a board member as well of the church for a while. And my grandmother was one of the women that would work in the kitchen, cooking and stuff like that. So they were pretty well known in the church community.
Yeah. Your family was very involved in the church community.
Pretty much.
Did your appreciation for the church and that kind of community grow over time?
It did. Um, when I went to college, it was out of town. It wasn't here.
Where did you go to college?
Cal Poly at San Luis Obispo. And I was in the dorms for the first year, and there weren't any Armenians in the dorms that I knew of from anywhere. I'm sure there must have been, but I didn't know of any. And then I was fortunate enough to get onto the soccer team at Poly. And our first game back was with Fresno Pacific College back here. And we came back home. It was after 2 months of having been there nonstop, and stayed for the weekend. And I realized then that I felt so different there, or it felt so different there, because there were no Armenians. The type of Armenian that was here, that I grew up with and got used to, didn't exist over there. And so when I would go around with amongst the other students that were there, or go to town, kind of hang out in downtown area and stuff, and explore, I felt like I was in a different country. Now, we had vacationed in Pismo Beach and that area there growing up, once a summer for about a week. But you always knew that it was a vacation kind of thing, and you never really thought of that. But it hit me when I started living there, that there was no one that could relate to the way I grew up. And so many of them didn't know what an Armenian was there, so it was different.
Wow. How did you navigate preserving your Armenian identity in college in this new space where you didn't see as many people who were Armenian?
Well, by that time too, I was involved with an Armenian organization called AYF, Armenian Youth Federation. And I was involved in sports there.
Okay.
I was in track and soccer in high school, and we did AYF as well, and they did sports. And there was another track team from Fresno that would be participating once a year at the Western Armenian Athletic Association. I was at Chabot College. And there was a bunch of us that were in AYF that we were doing that together. So we pretty much well stayed in touch with each other. It just worked out that way, Those that didn't know what Armenians were, in my drawing area, in one of the classes, I had gotten a map of the world and put, you're here, Armenia's over there, and a little bit of a history of Armenia. I copied off the alphabet, and I had the tricolor flag for my grandmother in the corner. And if somebody wanted to, and I had the alphabet too. If somebody came over and said, what the heck is an Armenian? Point over, go read. So after a while, they understood and respected who we were.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how you navigate. You just get kind of stubborn.
That's great. What did you do after you graduated from college?
Well, because my parents paid for my education, and they were getting older, I wanted to come back home and be with them for a while. My profession, though, of architecture was taking me elsewhere, or trying to, you know what I'm saying? But I came back home for a bit, lived with them, got a decent job, second one. I got a very good job here, doing work that was very interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
So after about a year at home, I decided that I wanted to get my own place, an apartment or something. And my dad thought I hated them, just because why are you moving? Well, you know, it, I'm tired of being at home. I mean, like I'm an adult now, kind of thing. Want to have my own place. So he thought it was because they were bad. I don't know. No, it's the way he felt. But my mom said, well, instead of getting an apartment, why not get a house? I can't afford it. So they helped pay for that too, to get it started.
Mm-hmm.
And so I lived in a home for a while, and that's how it kind of got started. I did look for work in San Francisco, 1981, 82, as I got licensed. The work that was offered to me, I didn't particularly care for. It wasn't as diverse as the job that I had here still. And then we had just won a competition here for a decent building that we had participated in and decided to stay here.
Wow, you described that your initial work here was interesting work for you.
Which was very surprising to me.
Can you describe more what that means or what some of the important projects were? Or happened?
The first project that I was working on was the front entrance gate for Sunnyside Country Club. And I'm going to get a bit political here, unfortunately. Not political. It's going to be anti-Armenian. Sunnyside didn't allow Armenians to become members because they're Armenian. This was now 1977, early 77. My old boss, Walter Wagner, who was German, had established himself as a very prominent architect here. He did the courthouse here. He did the Sears buildings for the 11 Western states. He did a bunch of schools. He did the Joseph Magnan's building. He did a lot of stuff. And so he got this job. And so when he came over to me, he says, you're going to help me with this. And when he had told me where it was, I did mention to him that I don't think I can because, what happened. And they just looked at me and says, I really don't care. Either you're going to do it or you're going to leave. So I said, okay, I guess I'll stay. So I helped them out. But I eventually was able to work on school projects for Fresno and Oakhurst. Did the Bank of America up at Oakhurst that just got replaced by Chipotle, I heard. So one of my buildings actually now got demolished.
Oh.
Did the psychiatric facility at VMC with my boss, Ed Rubin at the time, and another architect, Ed Goodwin. Just a lot of different buildings. Did work for on Salvation Army downtown. Quite versatile stuff. So yeah, and it was of a design type that I enjoyed. It was intriguing. So that's what kept me here.
As you've spent your work life in Fresno as well, I was wondering if you noticed any changes happening in the Armenian community over time.
Yes and no. The Armenian community now certainly is a bit different, just because you've got other people that have come in that are Armenian from other countries and wanting to keep their aspects of their life from where they were from. Haven't always blended with ours, but that's just the way things are. Just you have to accept that. I mean, if you don't, that's fine too, but you'll be probably pretty upset. It's just a matter of being open-minded and working with it.
Yeah.
you know.
And have you continued being a part of the church?
Um, well, I started, yes, I started with the nomination for Historic Register, National Register, and then they had me help them develop the new Sunday school
Uh-huh.
and the gym that was constructed, as well as in the remodel of the small hall, and then just recently the remodel of the large hall.
Wow.
So I've been since 97, 98, 98 is when all that started. So I've been involved pretty much on that aspect.
What has that meant for you?
Um, Proud of it, thankful that they are willing to, offer me the work. They didn't look towards anyone else. They felt that because my family had already had such a history with the church, that they would just continue, I'm assuming.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been very thankful for that.
Wow. I was wondering if raising your kids, you ever spoke Armenian at home or had any special traditions that you tried to upkeep?
Traditions, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Armenian, we didn't speak that much. Blanche's mom uh, spoke Armenian with them when she would take care of them. My mom would sometimes, I think, but I think Roxy, Blanche's mom, was more Armenian oriented to them than my mom was.
Yeah.
As far as language, the customs and stuff, we all did, still do, pretty much.
That's great.
Families get together for a variety of reasons and stuff like that, whether they be Christmas or birthdays or anniversaries or something like that. We all get together.
I was wondering if you have or would ever visit Armenia.
No, I haven't.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been a bit of a debate between Blanche and myself. She wouldn't mind going. But if I'm not allowed to go to Bitlis, which is in Turkey, which is where my family ended up, then I'm really not all that interested.
Mm-hmm.
I am and I'm not. Okay, it's not on my bucket list
Mm-hmm.
per se. Yerevan would be, I think, a good place to go see and to experience, not just nationality-wise, but architecturally. You know,
Mm-hmm.
but it's it's either here or there. I don't have any ties to Yerevan, and so it would just be like going to Europe or the Orient. It's just like another trip.
Yeah. And would you or have you ever visited Bitlis in Turkey?
No.
Okay.
Zach was close
Mm-hmm.
on one of his trips, and he was going to go there. But then, unfortunately, Syria started bombing Turkey, I think, and they had to cut the trip short. So he never really made it to be. I think they went through it. Wait, hello. I'd have to ask
Almost.
Zach. So.
Yeah. Do you have any wishes for the Armenian community of Fresno for the future?
Yeah, stay Armenian.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that you don't have to be 100% Armenian blood, but just keep the culture alive, And I think the churches here do a great job.
Mm-hmm.
All of them. They have the functions that go on at their places. It's open to the public. They're very embracing in having people visit them. I think that works out real well.
Yeah.
So I'm happy for that. Now I don't know what it's like in the other communities, although I do know San Francisco. I went there for a funeral, and I went to the church, one of the Armenian churches, and they all kind of wondered who the heck I was. Um, and until they knew who I was, family-wise, not me, but family-wise, um, they were a bit taken back, you know. But once they knew where I was from, kind of thing, they were 180 degrees, much nicer.
Interesting. And would you say that's a different dynamic than the churches here?
I don't see that happening here. I see it, and you know what? That could be just that one time. You know what I'm saying? I'm not sure if that happens, and I can't imagine that happening a lot. But most of the people here in the churches have been very welcoming. They're very curious about who you are and where you're from and stuff, certainly. Why not? But not in a mean way, you know? So I think that I'm proud of the churches that are here and the Armenians that are here.
Yeah.
Even for when the group of Armenians that came from Beirut or Lebanon, like Badajan's group, they were very well welcomed. You know, sorry to see you have to come because of what was going on over there, but you know, you're more than welcome here. We weren't going to do to them what the general public did to us, you know, earlier when we came. I say we, my parents and their generation. So, and I don't know if that's like that in the other cities in the United States.
Have you had challenges with preserving being Armenian?
No, I don't think of any. I can't think of any right now. Other than maybe feeling guilty about some things, you know, but not being truly Armenian, you know, to some extent. But that's not happened very often.
And I was wondering if you could tell me, what does being Armenian mean to you?
How much time do we have? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. It'll be brief. What it means to know where you came from, to not forget the reason why you're actually here, meaning the massacre and all the people that suffered as a result. Not forget that. There were other massacres that occurred prior to that, you know, and that to make sure that you maintain the proper personality, a good personality, that you are a person that contributes to the, not, and I don't mean monetarily necessarily, but contributes to the human way of being an Armenian. You know what I'm saying? Not to let that go. And to be proud that you're from where you're from, and not to forget. And I think tried to do that with Zach and Robin. And the relatives, Blanche's siblings and their kids, same kind of thing. And my sister and my niece. You know, they're not all necessarily involved in the Armenian organizations, but they certainly know who they are and where they're from, and what the issues were for those people coming, the family.